Hi everyone, my name's Eugene Meidinger, and this is another episode of BI in 10 minutes. And today's topic is training. Specifically, what is my litmus test, the thing that I like to optimize for, either in producing my own training on technology or consuming training of others. And this has been on my mind because one of my goals for 2023 is I want to learn about Azure Synapse. I see a lot of investment from Microsoft. I see a lot of people talking about it. And so I want to get to the point where I can make training, maybe consult on it. Some of the stuff scares me because I usually don't deal with enterprise level data sets and hardware, but I want to learn enough to be dangerous. And I've been frustrated. There's been some good content out there. I've gotten some good recommendations, but a lot of the content around Synapse doesn't meet my personal litmus test. So what is that test? Well, I like to optimize for the distracted learner. And so when I say distracted learner, the persona that comes to mind is, can a viewer of my content, can they learn anything at all at 3 a.m. with a cranky baby that they're trying to soothe? My video is over on a second monitor, they're kind of half listening and they're browsing, say, Reddit or something like that. And you might say, well, it's impossible to learn anything like that. And that's largely true. Most of it's just going to go in one ear and out the other. But I think that there's things that we can do that help people learn in spite of themselves, in spite of their circumstances. And so really there's two reasons why I think this is important. First is by helping the people who are in the most difficult of circumstances. We help everyone. And two, it supports different types of learning because we'd all like to think that everyone's focused and paying attention. Like I've said it before, if I could just lock all of my viewers in a Faraday cage where they have no access to Wi-Fi or their cell phones, that would be great. But that's not the world that we live in. So let's talk about that first part. Microsoft has this really great inclusivity toolkit for design. And so you can see a chart here where it shows what they call the persona spectrum. And I really, really like this because it shows that a lot of handicaps or impairments have a time factor to them. And so anytime you watch someone in the Microsoft space give a talk on accessibility, you'll see this chart inevitably. And so we've got handicaps or impairments that are permanent. Someone with one arm is always going to have one arm. They might be able to get some sort of prosthetic, but for the most part, they're going to be fairly limited, and that's not going to come back, right? They're not some superhero with mutant healing powers or anything like that. But you also have people where the impairment is temporary. Someone has an arm injury. That's something that ideally is going to heal over time. And so it's time limited. And then you have people where the impairment is extremely time limited. It's situational. So again, you have that cranky baby at 3 a.m. Well, you're using one arm to cradle it. And so anything we can do to help the person with a permanent handicap, a permanent disability of having just one arm, benefits the person who has an arm injury and benefits the person who has a baby that they're trying to soothe. And I feel the same way about learning. The things that I can do to help benefit that person up at 3 a.m. just watching something on the side, trying to soothe that cranky baby, the better I can help everyone learn. So what are some of those things that help those types of people? And so there's three that come to mind immediately, but there's a lot more. So the first one is vocal variation. If you are not fully focused on what's on screen, you're depending on your ears to tell you, is this a change? Is this important? Is this worth emphasizing? And so I try to treat my job in part like being a voice actor. In fact, I've talked to people about maybe getting voice acting training because I try to include lots of verbal punctuation to let you know this is important. Because it gets really hard to focus if someone's monotonous and uses the exact same cadence for every single thing. It becomes very difficult to follow, right? I can't stand that because I don't know what the important parts are. I don't know where the breaks are, any of that if I'm not watching the video. So vocal variation is important. Emphasis is also important, both in voice but also in the slides. One of the things that I really love to do, and anytime I'm giving advice to someone about their presentation, I advise this, is figure out what's your number one takeaway and put it on a big background color slide with a single sentence. And so what I mean by that is, if I'm talking about, say, Power Query, right? One of the takeaways might be that anything you could pay someone minimum wage to do in Excel, you can do with the language, right? That's one of my like zingers, or whatever you want to call them, pithy one-liners, however you want to think about it. And if I'm giving a presentation, that might be the one thing that if you pop in, you see a slide, and then you run out because something's on fire. I want it to be that. And so that helps me figure out, okay, how do I want to design my content? But also, what do I want to repeat? What do I want to focus on? What do I want to pause on and take a break and give some breathing room? And then the third thing is motion. We are all easily distracted, and staring at an unmoving screen while listening is difficult, right? And so one of the things I learned at Pluralsight is let's have something change every 30 seconds. Now, it doesn't have to be crazy and wild. There was some training content I watched about Kafka SQL, and it was frustrating because there was a little talking head and it would shrink and disappear and then show up on the other side, and then talk a bit and shrink and disappear and show up on the other side. So I felt like that was a little bit too much. But when I do bullet points, I almost always try to animate them so they appear one at a time. That helps me with my pacing, but that also has something changing on the screen. You can get away with a lot more in person, but with video online, you don't have as much forgiveness. And techniques that work well with video online also translate well to in-person presentations. So that's the first thing, is doing these types of things for the distracted learner actually improves learning and retention for everyone. But the other thing is that I have a tendency to learn in a different way than some other people. So I tend to engage in this like continuous passive attention for content that either I know almost nothing about or way too much about. So the stuff I know almost nothing about, my friend Anthony Nocentino recently put out a Kubernetes course. And sorry, Anthony, I'm probably never going to use Kubernetes. He might disagree. He might think it's the wave of the future. But as a business intelligence person, especially with Power BI, with desktop applications, I don't think I'm touching Kubernetes anytime soon. But I want to know enough that I don't sound like a dummy when I talk about it. I want to be able to speak quasi-intelligently about it. The level of, well, Kubernetes is Greek for like ship captain, and so it's a metaphor for how it's this orchestration layer for all these Docker containers, but like Red Hat has their own kind of containers. That's the level I want to be able to speak to. And so a lot of times I'll put something over on a second monitor and listen passively, and if something interesting comes up, I'll shift my attention. The other time is whenever I know way too much about something. So I do Power BI consulting. I'd like to think I do a good job. No one's asked for a refund yet, so I take that as a good sign. But sometimes I'll watch a fundamentals course. I know 80 to 90% of what's in that course. I don't need to be providing my full attention. Instead, I'll have it off on the side. And then if I hear something new or different or that's changed, because it changes every month, then I'll pivot, maybe go back 10 or 15 seconds and re-listen. So I think it's important to be able to support those types of learning as well. So I hope this was helpful.